Good evening. This is the Town of Chatham Planning Board hybrid meeting for March 24th, 2025. It's 4 p.m. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly thereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing and on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please notify the chair. I see no one, but I don't see anything up here on the display. Okay. Any person interested in or wishing to be heard on this zoning proposal should call the following teleconference number to join the hearing. Call-in number is 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 904-902-789#. I think that was for the 5 o'clock one, though. Pursuant to the Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 signing of the Acts of 2023, extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency and suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20, until March 31st, 2025. This meeting of the Chatham Planning Board is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 904-902-789#, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Chatham TV, formerly Channel 18, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. I'd like to begin with a roll call. Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, present.
Bob Werschafter.
Bob Werschafter, present.
Charlene Greenhall.
Charlene Greenhalgh, present.
Frank Scheer.
Frank Scherer, present.
Bob Dubus is absent, and Catherine Hepburn.
Catherine Hepburn, present.
And Art Spruan, present. I'd like to begin with the regular business. Penrose presentation on project development at 1533 Main Street. Is there someone who would like to introduce themselves and introduce the project to us? We have not been, other than I think a one-page thing that we got a long time ago, we have not seen the plans other than what was just in our packet.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Rio Sacchetti. I'm a developer with Penrose, and I will start off introducing the project. We have our design team with us to help go into the details of the site plan and more specifics. If I could get some help putting the presentation up on the screen, please. Great, thank you. So a little background on this project. This is at 1533 Main Street. This is currently a town-owned property. The town issued an RFP for development in the spring of 2024, looking for affordable and workforce housing. We responded to it. We were selected as developer. And since then, we've received site control through a land development agreement. And the intent was to permit what we had proposed to the town during the RFP process through a comprehensive permit. But before doing so, to go meet with as many of the boards and committees as possible, get as much feedback as we can to do a friendly 40B, something with a lot of community input and something that's going to be well received by the town. So a little bit about Penrose. We're a national residential developer headquartered in Philadelphia, but we have a local Boston office. That's the office I work under. as well as my colleague who's here tonight, Carmen Chung. And the Boston office is the office, and Carmen and myself are the principals that are working on this specific project. It's not anybody from out of state. We also like to point out the Penrose Management Company. We're not just developers. We also have a management company that will take over once the project's built throughout the life of the project. We don't just build and sell. This is a long-term hold. Primarily, we're using tax credits to finance the project. And that's part of using the tax credits is you have to have a long-term hold. And having our own management company, make sure that we maintain the project high-quality standards and also compliance with the different subsidy programs that are used to fund this type of project. Below that, I'd like to introduce, this is, I've said this a couple times, so Katie's probably heard it a bunch, but what we have for a design team here is really our all-star team, is what I call it. We have Horsley Witten as the civil engineer, Union Studios as the architect, and Crowley Cottrell as the landscape architect. And they're the creative minds behind what you'll see pretty soon with the plans. What we put here is just a listing, and it's not inclusive of everything, but it's a pretty good list of who we've met with and have presented plans to. We've tried to keep the plans pretty much apples to apples as we kind of go through this process, so we can keep things, we can incorporate everything holistically before we get to ZBA, and so people are commenting on the same set of plans, but there has been some progress since we initially started. We've recently gone to Chatham Historic. That, and as well, there was another historic, I think. There was Chatham Historic, and then there was the Historic Business District before coming to you tonight. There's just a couple of things I want to reinforce before we get into the plans. The Embrace Chatham, we're trying to design something that fits into the community as best we can. Community engagement, that's something I just hit upon earlier. We see this as a partnership between us and the town in terms of what gets built. And I guess that also reflects the shared vision, getting input from as many stakeholders as we can. Okay. I would like to now introduce the project architect, Paul from Union Studios, to introduce himself and start walking us through the plans. Thanks.
Thanks, Rio. Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Atman. I'm a principal at Union Studio Architecture and Community Design. We are based in Providence, and we also have a small 5-person office in Philadelphia. So we have our sole mission in the office is to use the power of design to enrich lives and strengthen the communities. Whether that's through planning, housing, institutional work, there's a baseline commonality that we strive to work within the communities and better them. So we are partners, leaders, stewards, artists, and we're grateful for every project that we work on. We've had an extensive experience on Cape Cod, and about 7 years ago, we were commissioned by the Cape Cod Commission to work with them on a community resiliency and design partnership, where we traveled to 5 Cape Cod communities, exploring and understanding the fabric and the Cape Cod character and the architecture that is prevalent around Cape Cod and even in Chatham, and looking for opportunities in small-scale development, incremental development, that would really contribute to the housing crisis on Cape Cod. And from that, we published a missing middle publication many of you may be aware of, and it's been circulated quite a bit on Cape Cod by the Cape Cod Commission. and other town planners. And it looks at really a variety of housing types, from a single family to duplexes to a little bit of a larger scale that is not elevator served, but about a 12-unit walk-up as at the larger end of a building type. And what we found in this exploration is that this building type is very prevalent in communities and on Cape Cod, and you may not recognize it in the architecture right off if you look at a building, but these are some examples of buildings that have more than 2 or 3 units within them, and then as you together in a parcel of acreage, they start adding up and create a density that is achievable to address the housing crisis. So I'll jump into the site plan. This here is a hybrid site plan. The magenta buildings here, I'm going to get used to this cursor, there we go, are the existing structures that are on the site. There's a single-family home up along Main Street, and then small sheds and a couple other smaller cottages in the background in various conditions of decay or reuse. Some of them are quite nice, some of the smaller structures. But our proposal is to either demolish them or relocate them with the help of the town, hopefully. And then we're proposing a new neighborhood for Chatham near the West Rotary. These are a couple of the images of the structures there. This here is that single-family home along Main Street, and then some other small cottages and sheds. Since the RFP presentation back in, I think it was April or May, we've also met with some town people back in the summer, and we've worked on improving this and getting some early feedback. And as Rio mentioned, we've extended that sort of outreach to particular boards to get feedback from them before we go and apply for the 40B process. We added additional parking along the interior roadway of the neighborhood. We added accessible parking spots. We repositioned buildings so that the 3-story portions of a couple of the buildings are further from the neighboring structures. We decreased the overall length of the management building along Main Street, so there's a little bit less frontage on Main Street, and the program would be pushed further to the back. We widened the interior road to 24 feet per the fire department request. And we identified trees that could be saved. There's some nice mature trees, and we've designed around them. And Mish will be talking about that in a little bit. And we've also identified areas for solar panels on the rooftops. I'd like to walk you through the proposed site plan. Up on the top of the page is Main Street. We're proposing 2 roads in and out, the ingress and egress at both curb cuts that bring you into the neighborhood, swing you around a common green along the back side where there's buildings at the back property line, and then a U-shaped turn out back onto Main Street. We've have the larger 3-story structures. I'll talk about that in a minute. Fronting Main Street on both ends to give that some presence and frontage to emphasize the walkability and the new sidewalks and the new work that's been happening in West Chatham. And then the management building is anchoring the neighborhood with a management office, maintenance, as well as a common room that the residents could use. And that is opened up onto the common green that the residents are able to use and recreate with. And also there's some play structures, which Mish will talk about a little bit more. So getting into the architecture, this here is the view along Main Street. So you can see that this is still a 2-story building with an occupied attic. And then the management building is a 1-story structure. And right now, we've actually proposed a nice cupola to the ridge line to give it a little bit more character. This is the old community building or management building from the RFP. You could see the length of it in this direction is much longer than what we are proposing now. We've shortened it up that way, and pushed some of the program toward the back of the site. And that was really refining Penrose's desire for how the spaces are adjacent to one another within the building, and how they also integrate with the landscape and the roadway. The architecture is very simple, pitched roofs, gable ends, traditional porches made with and the siding is lap siding with board and batten. We'll do, I think, divided light pattern as casement windows for energy efficiency. And although we're right now looking at white on white, meaning white trim on white clapboards and siding, we're hoping to introduce some character and individuality to each of the buildings, because all the apartments have their individual doors to the outside. None of the buildings have shared stairs, so everyone, once they open the door, they're within their apartment, and they have direct access in and out, which is really nice. We've begun to get into the technical drawings since the last fall, and we're about 40% through our design development set. Next up is to calculate the building height with specific engineering and grading that Horsley Witten Group has been working on. The first one that, I'm sorry, went too quickly. This here is a 3-unit townhouse style. So each of the buildings has front entry doors. There's a unit here on the left, one in the middle, and one on the right. There's a couple of those building types. Then the other one has 6 units. It's also perceived as a townhouse style, but there's two apartments on the ground floor, and then 4 apartments above. So it's 4 one-bedrooms over 2 two-bedrooms. And then the larger one is also 6 units. And in this case, we have 2 ground floor apartments, a 2-bedroom on the ground floor on the left side, and a 3-bedroom on the right. And then there's a couple of 1-bedrooms above the 2-bedroom, and 2 townhouse-style apartments above the 3-bedroom. And it's only in this case that we're occupying the 3rd floor. And these, I know there's going to be discussion about building height and stories, but it's well right at the calculated 35 feet plus or minus for what is allowed in the zoning ordinance. And I wanted to share with you some examples of architecture in and around Chatham that also are at that scale and that architectural character of white claps, white trim, occupied attics. They are here, so they are part. It's very characteristic of what we're proposing to what is already in and around Chatham. Earlier, I mentioned that there's a 3-story ridge line, which is a couple feet higher than the rest of the building. For instance, this building up along Main Street and this one, the red line indicates that higher ridge line, and the blue line indicates the lower ridge line. The green shows a 1-story ridge line of the management building. So you can see that what we tried to do is put the higher ridge lines further into the middle of the site, so they're not along the edges where there's residences. Although this here is a hotel, the motel, we pushed it to the further into the site. Then I'll turn it over to Mish from Crowley Cottrell.
Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Crowley from Crowley Cottrell, a landscape architecture firm. So Paul already quickly went through the site plan, but I just wanted to show a couple different things. We have, a robust planting plan here with street trees along the street here and along the streets and parking to provide shade on the parking. And we also have screening trees around the property on the outside, a mix of evergreen and deciduous trees. And as well as then some plantings up around the buildings at the fronts. In the center is the center is the sort of a town green or the neighborhood green. The trees that are outlined in white with the white circles on them are existing trees that we are working around. Therefore, we are not trying to change very much of the topography to save the roots of these trees. So where they're close, there's some trees over here that are very close to the buildings. We would be doing root pruning, working with an arborist to make sure we do the best we can to save the trees. On the inside here, we have a playground. We have community gardens, like raised garden beds that people in the neighborhood can use. And then we have a pergola trellis area for shade and picnic tables, so people can grill out here and spend time as a neighborhood park. Whoops. Oh, sorry about that. How do I get out of? You'd think by now we are tech savvy after all these years and working this way. Sorry about that. So I wanted to just show a couple of precedent images just to show the character of what we're thinking. There's the raised garden beds, a picture of them on the upper left. A playground, not a very bright playground that you'd see sort of urban. It's much more, it's like wood structure, so that there's a little bit also of natural play as well as some slides and things that you can incorporate in. As you can see on the lower one, we have the lower image shows different logs that are painted for some color, but they don't have to be, so it's more natural play. On the upper right, it's just showing sort of the town green so that kids can play, walk their dogs. And then an idea of a trellis shade structure for picnicking. So these are the trees that we are trying to attempt to save right now. We have also identified there's a large area of trees in this corner that we are surveying and trying to also keep. And so this will allow, we'll probably clear any kind of shrubby understory, but open up so that this can still be open, and so there's sight lines into here. But we are going to attempt to save most of these trees and work them in. The last thing is the lighting. We're using two different, this is a pedestrian post light, so those would be on the outside here, so they're a pedestrian scale to light all the sidewalks, and then using a smaller scale bollard light that's on the inside. The light fixtures are dark sky compliant, and none of them will there's no spilling of light off of the property. And next is Joe is going to talk about the civil engineering. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Joe Henderson, Horsley Witten Group. We're a engineering firm here on the Cape, main office in Sandwich. And I thought I would just give a brief overview of our approach to the stormwater, wastewater, and kind of the water, the kind of three main utilities and pieces we're working on. This is our grading plan, a work in progress, but it demonstrates kind of where we're looking for proposed grades. The site slopes from Main Street back down this way on the site. So our approach is to capture the stormwater first flush, we call it, in tree trench systems. So that's just a tree filter pit. So the first flush would go into those, with the additional larger storms going into the underground storage chambers. And you can kind of see those here. There we go. So these are the chamber systems, and then the tree trenches kind of here lined up along the road. Again, those are mainly concentrated down on the lower side of the site. We're at the lowest area. We're also, as part of that, we'll be putting together detailed drainage calculations, demonstrating that we meet the stormwater policy and any local regulations that go along with that. The buildings, the roof runoff for them will be directed directly to those underground infiltration chambers also. We've had some recent work doing some test pits out at the site, and we've discovered it's pretty underlying sandy soil, so it's good news for that. The sewer, there is sewer available in Main Street. So there's 3 sewer stubs actually along the frontage of the property, so we'll be utilizing those to connect into the municipal sewer. I expect that we will need, along the bottom row here of the site, some pumping, just because of the topography, but our goal would be to maximize gravity flow to the system as much as we can. So let me advance to the next slide. This kind of gives you a little bit of an idea on the sewer. Here's the sewer mains coming down the streets, and the buildings would all be connected to those. Again, this is kind of in progress, because we do have some a little bit more information on the sewer that makes us think we might need to pump a little more than we thought. So that's with the sewer. The water, again, water is available in the street, so it's a simple looped connection. The 2 entrances lend to that, and that's what the DPW would prefer to see in this situation. So the water main will be looped around the site and back out to the main. We do anticipate coordinating with DPW on the sewer and the water, on any requirements or requests they have in that regard. And with that, I think, Rio?
Thanks, Joe.
Yep.
So as you can see, we've done our initial due diligence of the site, environmental, survey, geotech, test borings. We're working on the stormwater management plan, which would be included in our comprehensive permit submission. We also have a draft traffic study that we'll also be including once that becomes final. This was our original proposed schedule. We're a little bit behind what's shown here, which is basically we're down looking at permitting and approval. That third line down, January through April. We'll be starting in April. It took us a while to get project eligibility statements from HLC, which is a prerequisite to going in for any comp permit. And typically those, you usually see those in 30, 60 days. I think we were over 90 days. One of the reasons was they wanted appraisals done, and so they went through a third-party appraisal, and that kind of extended their timeline. But those are in hand now. And then, so we intend to go through the permitting this spring. Our next step after meeting with you, as currently planned, would be into the ZBA. So we anticipate, based on whatever types of feedback we get from you as a board tonight, being able to wrap up some last things we need to do on our end, being able to incorporate comments into the design and get a design package and submission package in to the ZBA by mid-April. Okay, that brings us to the end of the presentation. I'm sure that you probably have many questions. I'd like to invite the team back up to assist me, and we're welcome to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Very nice presentation. I'd just like to remind the board that this is not a site plan review. This is a friendly 40B. So this goes before the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we will not see it again. So if we, go ahead.
Actually, we will have the opportunity to see it again. It has to be referred to this board for any
Correct.
comments that we may have.
Right. But it's much more limited than our full site plan review that we have. Of course, if you want to extend some comments or questions, so to get some clarity on this, I'd ask the board members. Warren, if you'd like to start. Yeah.
Well, first off, I think you've done an awful lot of work, which is, I think, very consistent with the town's expressed interest in addressing the issues that this project addresses. And I give you a lot of credit for that. I don't have any issues, but there are a few things that I would like to mention. One is that we're very optimistic that we have a new draft zoning bylaw for the West Chatham Neighborhood Center, which is essentially contiguous to your property here. And that represents a tremendous amount of input from the town, from the voters, as well as outside consultants from the county and consultants engaged by this planning board. So I might encourage you, for your interest, to take a look at that draft bylaw, because there's a great deal of input in there which will affect the neighborhood outside of your neighborhood that you're creating. There may be some useful approaches in there. It's a form-based code that is being developed. You may have already seen a prior draft, and if you have, then much of what is in there is unchanged, although there are a few things that have been added in the last iteration or so. So I just encourage you to do that. I'm curious as to density on this. What is your calculated density for this project? However you might define it in, let's call it 20 dwelling units per acre.
I don't have that information handy. We have 48 units. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Rick.
Right. Again, I don't have an issue with that. I'm just, it's always an issue when you talk about planning in the town. You know, our West Chatham Neighborhood Center addresses the issue of density in multiple different ways. And I just wanted to see how this would fit in. So thank you for that. I did notice that in the plan that we'd received here, there are 89 parking spaces, and only 3 of which are handicapped spaces. Now, I assume that probably fits the requirements, but the question is that adequate? This is a senior community. I think you can expect there will be some seniors that are in there, and it's just a thought. Is 3 enough? And I did want to ask, with respect to the parking, whether your plan is to have assigned spaces for the units that are there, or it's just everybody, you know, first come, first serve, to park close to your house. You know, I think my personal preference, and I think in general the town's preference, is that if you have dwelling units, that somebody have an assigned space. But that's just a comment, personal comment. It's not anything that's a requirement, and it would depend on the site plan review when we ever do see a final site plan as to whether it's an important comment or one that we would perhaps make specific recommendations on. Just a question, is there, in the number of spaces that have been developed, was it, I believe I read somewhere it was 1.5 parking spaces per unit? Was that the design criteria,
1.8, yeah.
1.8? In that,
It was
were-
originally the lower number.
does that add up to the total spaces, or is there additional for guest parking, so to speak? Or does that 1.8 include the dwelling units plus visitors?
That's the totality of all the spaces.
Okay, just for clarity.
Yeah.
The building height was mentioned here, and of course, I'm not the civil engineer now, but the holy grail here always seems like building heights of 30 feet above whatever, however you measure that. I noticed that several of these buildings are higher than that. And I don't know if that's an issue for you, whether it's been thoroughly vetted and, but I raise it because anytime I see something that's more than 30 feet, I know that somebody is going to not be happy, that's all. The landscape plan, I thought, was, very nicely thought through, and the idea of saving as many trees as possible is certainly a very good idea. Thank you for that. The landscaping is obviously something that is maintained by the management company, correct? It is presumably the case that all these units are being contemplated to be rental only? Or is there ever going to be a transition where a home ownership condominium, I'll call it for lack of a better word, would be possible? Or is there just ownership of any of these dwelling units is not contemplated, just for my information?
Sure. It's all rental, and the financing mechanisms behind them only allow for rental.
Understood. And I think that's really my only comment. I do think it's, very nicely thought through. But do suggest you take a look at the draft bylaw, since it's essentially you are a transition area from the West Chatham Neighborhood Center. And so that it looks like a transition as opposed to a totally different streetscape is a useful idea just to have in mind as you get to the final presentations. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a good comment. We actually had looked at that draft bylaws, I think back in the early summer. So it sounds like it may have gone through more updates since then, so which would warrant us going back and taking another look at it.
Bob?
So if you were in front of us, the first thing we probably would be asking you is the traffic and the entrance and the exit. And I think that's where you're going to catch most of your concerns from the citizens here, because it's hard to make a left turn out of that, out of anywhere on that street in the summertime. Can you walk us through, is it a one-way circle or is it a two-way circle? Or is there one entrance or two into the property?
You want to take this, Joe?
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to the circulation. It's two-way traffic, 24-foot wide total drive aisle. And then, yeah, it's just two-way all the way around.
Okay. Well, I guess we need to make sure you have enough sight, for people who think they're going to come out of there and make a left turn. But I'm just saying that's where we probably would have spent most of our time talking to you about how's that really going to work on that busy street. And unfortunately, it'd be really good to make everybody go right to the roundabout, but you are to the right of the roundabout, so.
And I do know that Monroe's is engaged with a traffic engineer to do their own study, so that is in the process, or I think completed at this point.
So that was really my only planning board question, but I sit on the Energy and Climate Action Committee, and I'm going to take the opportunity now to ask, when you put the proposal in, you did say it was going to be Passive House certified. I want to just confirm that that's still your thinking?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, I would just, one clarification, I think we said we were gonna build it to meet Passive House certification.
Okay.
Sometimes there's significant soft costs with getting the actual certification, so we have some
I can live with
flexibility
that.
there.
I can live with that. And you will be using Mass Save and Cape Light to support you and all the incentives that they offer and things like that. The solar is interesting to me. Who's gonna benefit from the solar? The individual, how are you going to assign communal solar to the individuals? Are you keeping that money, or how's that working? I clearly want to encourage you to put as much solar up there as possible, but I think there has to be some discussion about how that fits into electric bills.
Yeah, we have a slide, I don't think it was included in this presentation, that shows where we think, shows the ridgelines that we think are great opportunities
Yeah.
for potential solar. We intend to, in fact, we'll have to meet the Passive House requirements. That include some portion of renewable energies. And there's some of the buildings, unfortunately, we don't have it to show you at this moment, but we can circulate it after the meeting. But there was some of the buildings have great frontage to the south, which would be perfect for the solar. The way that typically works, from what I understand, is it gets sold back into the grid and gets netted out from, and kind of offsets the electricity costs of the project. The way these units will work, the residents will have their own separate meters and be responsible for their own electric. The way it's currently designed is all electric everything, electric heat, hot water, and, miscellaneous electric as well. But the affordable units and the workforce units have what's called a utility allowance, which gets put out by the Housing Authority in the state, which is a reduction of their rent to offset for the cost of those utilities. So there's not a direct benefit from solar for the residents. There will be less common area electric costs for the owner, which is good because that's funds that we can put into other things like landscaping and resident events.
Okay, good, that's good. All right, last question. The new code requires 20% of the parking sites to be wired for EV. I just want to make sure you're going to do that.
Yes, yeah, we might not show that, but yes,
You don't actually have to put them in, but you have to have it wired.
yeah. Okay, and we typically use a dual charger for 2 spaces. Levitron, I believe, is the manufacturer. That's what we're currently installing in our other projects.
That's why his idea to have it assigned spaces doesn't work for me, so.
Yeah, and and we typically don't do assigned spaces. It usually creates a parking problem, because not everybody's coming and going at the same time, and to maximize a limited amount of space as much as possible. But we do usually put stickers on, so not anybody can just come park. If you have to get a permit sticker from the management to be able to park, and those are just given to the residents. There'll probably be some visitor, we don't show it, but there'll be some spaces usually at the management building where visitors can go and they won't be towed for not having the sticker.
Great. All right, thank you. Great job.
Charlene?
I actually have no questions, just comments that I think this is a well-put-together plan. I actually think from what we have been writing for zoning, this will be a good transition zone for what we're proposing and what you're finding as you go east on Main Street. I like the idea that you're maintaining as many mature trees as you can. I think that's important. I'm assuming utilities are all going to be underground, which will be a huge benefit. I like the common area in the middle. That's very New England. and the play area and the gardens. I think that I like what you've done here, and I'm pleased with it.
Thank you.
Frank?
I think you've done a fantastic job, and I commend you for that. So my comments are really quite minor, but in terms of lighting, it's not just a question of downward facing, but also the warmth of the light and the number of lumens. And I know there's a tension between security, people want it as bright as possible, but that can be very offensive. So I think you want to try to keep the warmth of the light as incandescent as possible and keep the, let me call it lumens or wattage, as low as you can do. As to the planting plan, I didn't see any indication of kinds of trees and I'm not going to ask you to kind of present on that, but presumably you're going to have a wide variety of trees, so if there's a blight that comes through, you don't wipe out all of the trees and all of that issue.
Yes, absolutely. It'll be a diverse set, native trees, lots of oaks and maples and
Yeah,
lots of, of a whole variety. Bayberry for shrubs and, yes, native plants for Cape Cod, not for all of Massachusetts. It'll
Right.
be for the coastal.
okay. Sidewalk. There currently is no sidewalk that goes in front of the property. Is there any thought about actually building the sidewalk in front of the property?
Sure, yeah, so we do have a sidewalk that is going to run all the way across the frontage of the property.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
so that's planned, yep.
Good. All right, thank you. To me, the streetscape is terribly important. And I think you showed a slide with the streetscape. It's very attractive, and I commend you for that. I was quite worried about that. But it's a few back. You almost started out with it, I think.
This one?
No? Yeah, and it's very attractive. I guess this is just my personal thought, but I'm not a great fan of cupolas. So I don't know where that thought came from, but small cupolas that are it's certainly not consistent with Cape Cod ethic, I think, or ethos. I mean, if people like cupolas, fine, but I think they look very, very silly, particularly when they're obviously fake, but there you go. Let's see. And I was worried that the buildings on either side would be a side view, but they're a front view, which is just wonderful. I personally don't have a problem with the height. You're saying they're 35 feet? Something like that?
Yeah, this is Paul again. It's a plus or minus at this moment. As I mentioned, Joe and his team are doing also Mish, are working out the exact grading.
Right.
As we know what that exact grading is along the edges of the building, because all of these buildings need accessibility for the ground floor apartments, then at that point, we can do the actual measurement and report back with
Right.
how it measures to the zoning ordinance and how it's
Yeah,
supposed to measure it.
it is very true that 30 feet seems to be an important number for Chatham. So try to keep it as below 35 as you can. I think every foot matters.
Do the new draft of the bylaws,
30 feet,
30 feet, but 2.5 stories
yes,
are deeded affordable.
yes,
So
right.
I would say that this is a 2.5 story typology. So
Understood.
It's
That
hard to
hasn't-
get 2.5.
That hasn't
stories.
passed yet.
Why, no, I said draft, and you brought it up. So one of the board members brought it up, but it's a point of discussion.
Right.
It's really hard to get 2.5 stories with 30 feet, because the 30 feet doesn't change. Like,
Right.
so that's a tough one. I mean, if a story is usually 10 feet floor to floor, then a 2.5 story would almost suggest that you got to bring up the building height too to get.
Well, that's one reason I'm
35 feet.
more agreeable to, than perhaps most, to increasing height. My last comment has to do, this, I think you've done a marvelous job, but as you drive in and through it, it's going to be a development. It's going to look like a development. And you've done a lot to put in articulation, and I presume that you're going to think about different colors and perhaps even different siding or something to create more differentiation between the structures. So I'll leave it there. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Frank. Catherine Hepburn, you have any comments or questions?
Yes. I have a few comments, but I think first what I want to say is I think you've done a brilliant job integrating something that's much needed in this town, which is affordable housing and rental units and greater density housing options for this town with the principles that we want to maintain from our comprehensive plan. Often those things have been seen to be competing needs that could never be worked out, to have both greater density and affordable housing, as well as maintain the aesthetics and livability and all the principles of the comprehensive plan. But I think you've done it, and I think you've done a terrific job, and I think this is going to be a great addition to our town. I also think it's consistent with what we're doing in the West Chatham Neighborhood Center. That is intended to be a mixed-use commercial and residential area that will have a range of housing options, market rate, affordable and attainable. And what we're thinking what the board has been thinking for the transition areas to the east and to the west of the West Chatham Neighborhood Center is just to create areas that are residential, but perhaps greater density residential and smaller units, so that again, we can provide more housing options for the town. And certainly what you're doing is in accord with that. The area directly east of this property, the board will be considering in future rezoning that area to allow for greater density, smaller unit residential. That would probably be market rate as well as some attainable and affordable. So I think you've done a really beautiful job to create affordable housing that really meets all the requirements we need it to meet in terms of maintaining beauty and livability. I love the common area, the common green area, and the common play space. It's great that you have a community building. I think that's very necessary. I think the buildings are well arranged with sidewalks and also the roadways that you've created and the parking. I think it's well arranged for accessibility and safety. I also think the design of each building they're aesthetically appealing, and they're consistent with the New England aesthetic and with the Chatham aesthetic. So I'm going to try to not wax too ecstatic, but I do think you've done a great job. I agree with Bob Wirtschafter that the traffic study you do is going to be very important. It is just a fact of life. Main Street in the summer gets extremely busy and it's impossible to make a left turn. So I think you need to examine that really closely to make sure that there won't be problems with the traffic in and out of this development. What else did I want to say? The height issue, I think echoing Frank, we understand what you're saying about the 2.5 stories. Nevertheless, the bylaw right now in the town of Chatham is 30 feet is the maximum height. I'll let you sort this out with zoning board of appeals, I think, how you're gonna work with that. I also think your planting plan is great. I'm glad you're using native trees and a variety of trees. And what else did I want to say? I think that's basically it. I think you've done a great job with this design. I think it's well done. And I just want to compliment you on bringing something to our town that's very much needed. That's also aesthetically appealing and in concert with what we're doing in West Chatham and with the principles of our comprehensive plan. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. So I'll close out by complimenting you on your plan in here. I think I have some concurring thoughts associated with what almost all the board members have said, so I won't repeat those. I like Frank's comment about the visual look, colors and materials and that might be to mix those a little bit so they don't look all identical. I think that's great. I do have a couple. I'm an engineer. I'd like an as-built plan of all the underground utilities when you're done. When you're done with this and you walk away, and you may walk away eventually, we need to know how it was built, and not how the plan showed it. Sometimes that changes. That's just the way it is. I compliment you on your approach to stormwater management. That's always an important thing with our board. So it looks like you're going to be pursuing that, as we would like it to see if we were seeing a site plan. I do have some questions on the sewer. You said that you are going to service these buildings. Some of it would go gravity, some of it would be pumped. Now, is that going to discharge directly to the gravity line in Main Street?
So my plan was to put a manhole at the stub and would discharge to that and then flow by gravity from there to the main.
But it would go directly into the main?
Yes.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking that question is because we did have some challenging issues with the West Chatham Neighborhood Center with the densities. And we were made clear to us that if the gravity line, which is in Main Street, has the capacity for additional flow over and above what would be characteristically the number of dwelling units. So, and he said that that's only at about 40% capacity, so it's not going to be an issue. That's very helpful. That clears up a lot of concerns that we may have in case this was being redirected somehow to some of the pump stations that were in the area. I think that's mostly what I have. I was trying to handle the other things that I usually try to cover, but I wish you success in your next pursuits, and I guess you'll be receiving official recommendations or comments through the ZBA's referral to us when you formally submit to them. Oh, excuse me, I guess so. And I'd like to ask if there's any public comments of anyone. Would like to please come up to lectern and cite your name.
I'm outnumbered. Hi, I'm Frank Messina, South Chatham. I'm chairman of the Historical Commission, and by the way, your chart was wrong. You presented us on January 7th, not December. Just to let you know. Okay?
Thank you.
And when we had our meeting, it was a courtesy visit, I guess they called it, but in addition to that, the Historical Commission had a requirement to provide comments to Mass Historic, which we did, and in terms of the historical significance of the project and the impact on the historic historic area. West Chatham, and that particular just Chatham, is part of the HBDC, the Historic Business District, which is the other historical commission in town. Chatham is an interesting place in terms of, I think we have 4 major historic districts: the Old Village, now new, the South Chatham Village, the Marconi, and the HBDC. And this particular area in West Chatham, has a lot of history and a lot of historic homes right adjacent to where they're building it. And, the subject of streetscape came up in the Historical Commission, and that memo was shared with you, the commission, so hopefully you will have it and you looked at it. And interesting enough, when they appeared with their courtesy review to the HBDC about a week or 2 ago, they were the same comments that the Historical Commission had in terms of I'm trying to be nice about this, because I'm obviously different opinion than what you say, but, the overall density of the development, fine. I realize we have a situation where we're trying to, get 5 pounds of something in a 2-pound bag, and we're trying to squeeze it in, and we're gonna look the other way for density. Density was always a dirty word in Chatham, in the 40-some years I've been around here. We don't want density. Now, I guess we're gonna all take a deep breath, and we're gonna allow some more density for the good of the community. That's fine. But how do we do that? And the 30-foot height, that's important. We've been fighting that a long time. Now, you're right, it's up to the zoning board, and then maybe the courts, if they get involved afterwards, if the zoning board turns down to 30 feet. The position that we hear from the Pembrose is, well, we really can't do it. Well, you can, and maybe you're not gonna get 8-foot ceilings or whatever they want. So that's a problem. And that height is significant from my perspective and the streetscape perspective. They put a chart up, and they showed typical residents in Chatham. Well, they didn't do typical residents. If you noticed it, it was the 2 of the facilities, the Wayside Inn. Yeah, all right, that's like a hotel. And they showed another hotel building. They didn't show single-family homes and small homes in Chatham. When the first time they made a presentation that I attended, it was months ago, I gave to I think it was this gentleman here to my right, to my left rather, this book, Chatham, Sense of Place by the Sea. Was it you I gave it to? I don't know. Well, I guess maybe we'll give you this one. It's a book that the Historical Commission published about the legacy of Chatham's historic homes. We're not looking for you, in my opinion, and hopefully the zoning board is going to be more concerned about it than you folks were, in terms of the streetscape and how it looks. It just is not a good fit for Chatham, nor West Chatham, in my opinion. They need to do more to vary, and in fact, I think we had the comment, and HBDC had the same comment, to the negative impact on the historical streetscape. And we hope the developer would make changes to lessen the impact of this large development in the West Chatham HBDC and the local historic district. I'm kind of disappointed because the first time I've seen what they've done since they presented to us in January, they made a lot of changes. They heard somebody say they're going to put different colored doors. Oh, come on, give me a break. That's not what we want. That's not what I want. That's not, I think, what a lot of people in Chatham want. They'd like to see something to break this thing up so it doesn't look like what we're looking at. 2 buildings which are almost exactly the same, and then this large community building, which I know the members of the HBDC had some real heartache with that. Why do we need a community building? Okay, fine, you need a maintenance area, but do we need a community building? And you have reduced the size, it's fine, that's great. But I think there's a lot more work to do from my perspective. My problem is that, the horse is already out of the barn. They're going before ZBA. And I would hope that also from my perspective, that you realize that, I'll share it with you, it's your copy, okay, that, we're not in a position where it gets to ZBA and bam, all of a sudden now it gets rejected and compromise can't be made, that we can't go forward. So I would really seriously, from my perspective, from the historical preservation perspective, is that you take a really hard look at some way to reduce the impact of this housing project on Main Street. It's just a little too ticky-tacky from my perspective. It all looks alike. All the buildings look alike. You've got the same design and repeated it one after the other. It's one big rectangular construction, you know, and I realize what you're trying to do, and I know number of units and density, you're trying to make a lot of people in the town happy. Yeah, we're gonna get all these units in there. Well, maybe we gotta back away, okay, if that's what's necessary. And my real concern is not just this project, is I hope we don't fall on our face, and this is the last project that we do in Chatham. You know, Chatham is small. You know, we've got 66 miles of shoreline, and I don't know if there's, how many, 40 acres of upland? Probably less. So there's very little land in town, land that's developable. And so I think we're gonna have to be careful. We're gonna have to put these things in a way that they really fit within the residential community, which Chatham is. So, anyway, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Rick, would you like to come up and introduce yourself and provide us with your any comments or questions?
I'm Rick Levitt from West Chatham. You all know me as a strong supporter of this project. I certainly echo all of the comments here tonight that compliment Penrose and Union Studio for all of their work. And I'm speaking to you tonight, however, as an abutter. Could I have the site plan? Thank you. This property, it's a 3-acre property. Joe Buckley was my neighbor for 20 years. It has two personalities. The front of the property, the first half of it that faces Main Street, faces a commercial district. I brought my own. Up here. This is Main Street, of course, and we do have the motel now, a dormitory for CBI here. We've got the former and current Dunkin' Donuts with a 2.5-story building, and across the street over here is the Hook Fishman building, 2.5-story building, both with apartments above. Apartments across the street here, and over here, another motel. This first half is a commercial district, and the design is entirely appropriate for it. I'm talking about the second half, the back half, back here. This is my house. There are other houses on Barn Hill Road that abut this property. There are more houses on Jesse's Landing that abut this property. There are over a dozen 1-story or 1.5-story small residential buildings that closely abut the back half of this property. Penrose has been very helpful. I asked for a meeting. I've met with this team. We've talked about this. What I'm proposing to you tonight is what I proposed to Penrose. And I'm hopeful that you will present this or comment on it when the zoning board asks for your comments. What I've asked for is a replacement of these 3 tall 35-foot, 6-unit buildings that there's a residential building right here with a pool right there, and the people in that building are going to be staring right down at that pool. The privacy of the abutters, the residential abutters, is going to be destroyed by having these 3 tall, large buildings on the property. What I have proposed is a simple amendment. Instead of these are 6-unit buildings, these 3. They're 35 feet tall. Replace them with cluster, single-family cottages and duplexes that would be appropriate for the surrounding residential area. Half of the borders, the boundaries of this site is surrounded by residential developments on Barn Hill Road and on Jesse's Landing here. By the way, here's another pool. To be compatible with the neighborhood, this is what is required. This is a residential neighborhood, not a commercial neighborhood. This is a commercial neighborhood. So it does have 2 personalities. It should have indeed 2 different types and styles of housing that, or structures that go into this project. And by the way, if you introduce different types of housing structures, as Frank just mentioned, it's going to increase the appearance of the entire development. It won't look like a development. It will look like it's been there for a long time. So those are my comments, and I hope you will take them seriously when you get a chance to review or to comment to the zoning board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick. Any other comments? No? Well, thank you very much for coming. We'll see you again a little bit, or at least our comments will be being forwarded to the ZBA once we receive their request.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we have a couple of public hearings. I would just like to go through could I just ask, if you're going to talk, can you exit the area? I appreciate it. Thank you. Could I ask you, if you're going to be speaking, to take your conversations outside the meeting room? Thank you very much. Okay, I just want to go over the public hearing procedures first. We have 2 of them tonight. The clerk will read the public notice into the record. There'll be a presentation by the applicant. The board will ask questions and have comments. Then there'll be public statements in favor of the application. Next, the chair will read any correspondence that we have received. Next will be public statements opposing the application, any rebuttal. Board members' comments will be next up. And then the hearing will be closed, and then the board will do deliberations. After the board closes the hearing, the audience participation is not permitted during our deliberations. So our first public hearing is a citizen's petition, permitted uses within the Conservancy District, and I would like the clerk to read notice into the record.
Mr. Chairman, in accordance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 48, Section 5, the Chatham Planning Board will hold a hybrid public hearing on Monday, March 24th at 5 p.m. at the Town Hall Annex Large Meeting Room, 261 George Ryder Road, and via Microsoft's Teams to take public comments on the following proposed amendment to the protective zoning bylaw. Petition warrant article number to be assigned is to amend the Town of Chatham zoning bylaw, Section 4A2, by inserting a new paragraph M into Section 4A2, permitted uses in the Conservancy District as printed and provided in the legal notice. The full text of the proposed protective zoning bylaw amendment can be found on the town website, www.chatham-ma.gov/planning-board. Arthur Spru, Chair, Cape Cod Chronicle, dates 3/6/25 and 3/13/25.
Okay, thank you. So applicant, can you introduce yourself, Thad, and present your article to us?
Good afternoon. I'm Thad Eldridge. I'm with Impact Chatham. If there were people in the audience, I'd invite them to get flyers. For Catherine and others watching at home, impactchatham.org. There are 3 links on the homepage for the 3 zoning bylaws that we have before town meeting this year. One of them you've already heard, and now we have the stormwater in the Conservancy District. We reviewed this last year. I was unable to get it to town meeting due to some health issues, and we're back this year, stronger than ever. The stormwater in the Conservancy District is an issue. We can't build it. We can't design it. We can't meet the separation to groundwater. The Conservancy District are low areas where groundwater is relatively high. We're not allowed to cut, fill, or regrade to redirect stormwater runoff. And the purpose of this bylaw is just enabling, allowing people to regrade a site in order to direct water to stormwater, I'll say structures, but really we're looking for more natural stormwater structures. You have bioretention basins, rain gardens, and the like, because everything has to be kept up above that groundwater table. In the flyer, I've provided just a quick schematic of your typical stormwater system, and they get deep. When that groundwater is there, you don't get the separation. This affects a number of already developed neighborhoods. You may be aware that we're not allowed to construct a new house in the Conservancy District. We already have hundreds. So on the website, we've also provided a map that will show all the properties in Chatham that are within the Conservancy District. We are allowed to construct a variety of utilities in the Conservancy District already. Sewer, septic, water, electric, communications, and pipes associated with pools. That was really so that somebody could upwell. So we would just like to be able to take care of stormwater in a more appropriate way. When I was here in January, I was directed to a regulation that had been passed by the town that had not been published at the time. It wasn't published until I brought it to the attention of the town that it had not been published. But if there's an acre project, then we have to comply with stormwater management. Well, if that happens to be in a Conservancy District, we can't comply with stormwater management. Because of this, I hope for your endorsement on the article. If there are questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, I'd like to start with the other end of the, we'll start with Catherine. Do you have any comments or questions? That's the other end.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually don't think I have too many comments, except, Mr. Chair, may I bring up when we discussed it earlier, I think the comment that you made is appropriate. Thad, you used the word filling, and as you know, filling is not permitted in the Conservancy District, and so Art was thinking, and I agree with Art, that backfilling might be a better, more accurate term to use, because it doesn't allow for new fill or a change in elevation. It just allows for filling in where you've excavated. So that would be the one change. Other than that, I didn't have any comments. It seems like this is something that's useful and necessary, and I will let my colleagues continue.
Should I respond
individually or all at once?
Go ahead.
The bylaw actually does not allow for cutting, filling, or regrading.
Right,
And in some
Correct.
cases, if you want to put a berm in order to catch that stormwater runoff, then you would be filling, not backfilling.
okay.
Okay,
I understand that it's a difficulty, and all of these are reviewed by the Conservation Commission. They have a great number of resources to be able to either impose upon the applicant that an engineering review is conducted, or they can go to other staff members in the town to really look at it. And our assistant conservation agent is an engineer.
okay, Frank,
Okay.
you have any comments or questions?
Well, that was my question. This would require a permit from conservation.
Any significant work within the floodplain does require a permit from conservation.
Charlene?
No questions or comments. I'm actually very supportive of this amendment.
No,
Bob?
no.
No. Warren?
I too am very supportive of this. Appreciate your taking it forward the way you have, Ted.
Okay, so just a couple of things. I think when you're talking about creating berms and redirecting flows and things like that, that is going to start conflicting with other areas that are in the bylaw. So there's no criteria in this. It just talks in generalities. I think that raises an issue and a concern associated with one part of the bylaw saying you can't fill anything, and now you're talking about why we're going to create berms. I don't think that was the intent. If you have a natural low spot in here and you want to put a stormwater management feature in, sure. You can excavate down, put a rain garden in there. If you want to put an infiltration structure in there, don't change the grade. But I don't think the intent of superseding that other criteria should be something that you would want to open the book on. The other thing you mentioned about the stormwater regulations that were issued by the DPW are for areas that are disturbed greater than 1 acre. So the planning board doesn't have criteria for anything other than that at this point. So if an area that is being disturbed is only half an acre, then it doesn't apply to the same criteria. Now, you still need to deal with the stormwater handbook and things like that, but it doesn't fall underneath the same category that the DPW's stormwater regulations have issued. So I would say that that's something that I have a concern with because the language is so general and your statements that you're proposing to fill so that you could build berms and things like that, I'm a little bit leery that that's going to start butting heads with some other criteria that we have, and then who's going to make the determination associated with that? We generally don't run into this issue as a planning board because the only thing that we have purview on is the driveway. So we wouldn't have any comments or purview associated with this. It's not that I'm looking to have that because this is a residential piece and I think that we have to stick with our current practice of what we do reviews on. So I think that's a concern I have. I think if there was some limits and boundaries associated with this, this would be fine. I don't really object to it as a general comment, but if there's going to be major filling to create berms and that's not, I think, something that we would want to encourage or allow in conflict with other areas of the bylaw. So at this point, I'd like to do move on to public statements in favor of the applicant. Oh, excuse me, Thad, yes.
Sure. So the requirement was created back when the conservancy districts were the wetlands. They didn't want you to dump stormwater runoff directly into the wetlands. We have floodplain everywhere, and that's the major area that we're going to be targeting for stormwater systems. Now, we've worked on a number of projects. One of the main reasons why we started this one first I had a project down in the Little Beach area, and we were cutting. Somebody had a nice little bermed garden. We were moving the driveway over. It was before the planning board. I was complimented on it. We were inverting that garden, cutting everything out, and putting in a rain garden. The building commissioner came up to me afterwards and said, "That's the last one. You're not allowed to cut, you're not allowed to fill, you're not allowed to regrade in the Conservancy District." In some cases, if you're on a hillside and you have water streaming down that hillside, how are you going to catch it if you don't fill? You have to fill. And will we be opening the door for rampant changes? We have a Conservation Commission to review this. And this is specific in dealing with stormwater runoff. And if there is ever a question, they can always go to the building commissioner, the zoning enforcement officer, and say, does this pass that test? Is this part of the stormwater system?
Okay, thank you.
I'm not quite sure that's the only reason why we have a restriction here. I think people have decided that to build in these areas is generally not a good idea, and that to the extent we can limit that, and we have through the bylaw, we are protecting those areas. And the idea that, well, I hear what Art is saying, and it's like, I take that as very important, and what you're suggesting really weakens that in some ways, and that's my concern, and I think that's gonna be the concern of the citizens when this comes up for a vote. But
So,
I'm okay with saying, put it on the ballot, but I have major concerns about it going forward.
So why did this planning board put forward a zoning bylaw to fill in the Conservancy District when it's against a foundation?
That's not Phil.
that's, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been
Go ahead, Mr.
interpreted to
Chair.
be fill, it's landscape material, but everything counts as landscape material. So if somebody wants to put dirt right up against a building, they are allowed to.
The specific criteria, first of all, the first floor elevation needs to be above the floodplain, otherwise you don't get a building permit. So this was a ramping component that was put into the bylaw. This is before my time, but that's my interpretation of it. When somebody else comes forward and they say, okay, they want to put a garage over here and they want to raise the grade of the garage is not a habitable space, so whether it floods out or not, and that criteria, we were sort of opposed to that. Somebody wanted to raise a driveway to get up to this garage, and we were opposed to that as part of a recommendation as part of our review and recommendations on this. So this is starting to get a little bit more squishy, and unless there's much more specific criteria, this is going to head in several different tentacles, and I don't think that that's a good way to go unless there is more definition associated with this. You can't be using just general terms and expect that they're all going to be all okay. So I think that we have to be real cautious associated with this and see how this is going to be and work within the other provisions of the bylaw. And right now, there's no connection with it. Okay, with that, I'd like to open it up to any public statements in favor of the application. I see no one here, but anybody have their hands raised? No. Any correspondence that was submitted? There was no correspondence. So I'm assuming that there's no statements opposing the application? That's correct. No reason for rebuttal. Any other board comments on this? Yes, go
Mr.
ahead,
Chair.
Catherine.
So I just want to see, before we close the public hearing and deliberate and take a vote, is there a pathway to reconcile some of the issues that have been brought up? Can the language be addressed? Is there a way to solve the problem? could we even do it now? Or is there a way that we could propose to solve the problem, to make the language more specific so that it's not in conflict with other sections of the bylaw and doesn't create confusion?
I think your suggestion at the beginning was a good one, Catherine. Filling should be removed. Backfilling of a structure that you're excavating and putting backfill back into the same existing grade is all fine. So there could be some simple things that could be done in here, but as soon as you put filling with no criteria, there is nothing that's saying that you can't move all sorts of earthwork around in order to get an outcome you're looking for. He says, well, it's all because of stormwater. And that's not, and I think Bob Werschafter was right in this. This is not the intent of the way it was structured. If these are generally more floodplain areas, then, most of the time you're not supposed to be adjusting the grades in the floodplain area anyway. So there's very little area that's outside the floodplain that's in the Conservancy District. So I'm a little bit concerned that this opens up the door on something and then we get caught later on with one criteria in conflict with another criteria. Who makes the final determination associated with that? I think a simple thing to do, as you suggested, Catherine, is remove the word filling and make, and if you're going to want to backfill structures that are excavated, it would be back to existing grade. And that, I think, would remove that whole component of regrading the site.
If I might, Mr. Chairman? I'm not sure this would satisfy you. I understand your concerns. If you simply remove the words including excavation, filling, and regrading, so that it simply says the construction, maintenance, improvement, improvements as necessary to direct, treat, and infiltrate, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't even get into grading, because if you're in a floodplain, you're not supposed to be doing any of that.
You're not supposed to be, right?
However, I understand that a lot of what is being discussed here are existing issues.
Yep.
Existing homes that are built right in the floodplain. And they're making changes, right, wrong, or indifferent, they're being allowed to do them. And they need to provide for improvements in their grading or their drainage. I'm not even gonna say grading.
Right.
In their drainage. So I'm just wondering if just excluding that language would satisfy. So it would be, and improvements necessary to direct, treat, and infiltrate stormwater into water or stormwater maintenance systems.
So you're removing the word filling?
I'm suggesting we remove from including all the way through the word as.
Okay.
If I may, I've completed 2 or more projects for the town of Chatham that have been stormwater systems in conservancy districts. They've all included berms. There's a retention basin behind my office. Old Queen Anne Road runoff goes into this basin, ponds there. If we didn't fill in there, there would be no basin if we didn't put the berm in. Hardings Beach Road, across from Tappan Drive, up against those ponds, there were sediment forebays, there were a number of cells that were constructed. Again, without putting in those berms, there wouldn't be a stormwater system there.
If I might, I don't think this would preclude those berms. We're just taking out the language that seems to be angsting some people on the board, and I understand why.
Yep.
You would still need to follow, if the Conservation Commission, which those projects have to go through conservation.
They do.
If they had great angst with what was being proposed, they wouldn't allow it.
Yep.
So I'm actually trying to help you out here.
No,
I'm
I
not trying to
appreciate it.
argue, the other way. But it seems simple to me if we just take out, and I'm getting a little feedback here, I don't know why. The including excavation, filling, and regarding as necessary, out. so that it would simply say the construction, maintenance, and improvement to direct, treat, and infiltrate stormwater, et cetera. We
Right.
can't make that change, but
Yeah.
he certainly could make that change on town meeting floor.
I was just gonna say, the
And
warrant,
if he did, then perhaps the board would support that without that language.
I appreciate your suggested language change, but the warrant is closed, so we certainly can't make a change here, but
Exactly.
the applicant could, yes.
Right, and if it were to be amended to that.
Yep.
To take that language out, I think this board would be supportive of that amendment.
Yep. I don't have any issue with creating stormwater features that help with a piece of property.
Absolutely.
As long as they're done the right way.
And that's why I think those phrases there are what was causing the angst.
Okay.
And I understand that.
Is that something you would be open to?
I'll be open to it after a review with the zoning officer.
Okay.
Because if this renders the amendment unnecessary or irrelevant, if we're not able to construct these after that change.
Can we hold our recommendation until the night of town meeting, provided a meeting is, that we have the opportunity before then, at a future meeting, to make we can close the hearing and hold our recommendation.
I believe you could do that, or we could continue the public hearing until the next meeting to hear feedback from the applicant.
We could do that. Do you think you can have some information by our next meeting,
I will,
by the 14th?
April 14th.
April 14th?
I will bug the
Yeah.
zoning officer and
I think it would be helpful if this did get resolved a little bit and flushed out. I'm sure you could come up with something to make, get what you're looking for, but at the same time not open the door so much so, okay? Without any criteria here, I'm a little nervous associated with that. That's all, all right? So with that, do I have a motion?
I
to
move that
close
we,
the-
no, we're not closing the public hearing. I move
excuse
that
me.
we continue
Right.
the public hearing for this zoning amendment regarding the Conservancy District to no earlier than 5 PM on April 14th, 2025.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote. Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approve.
Bob Werschafter,
Bob Wirtschafter, approve.
Charlene,
Charlene Greenhouse, approve.
Frank Scheer,
Approve.
Catherine Halpern,
Yes, I approve.
and Art Sprue, I approve. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, don't go anywhere. So, next public hearing is citizens petition for exterior mechanical system appliances. And I've asked the clerk to read the notice into the,
I will,
the legal
I will
notice.
do what I'm supposed to do, sir.
Yes, please.
In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 5, the Chatham Planning Board will hold a hybrid public hearing on Monday, March 24, at 5 PM at the town offices, Annex Building, Annex Large Meeting Room, 261 George Ryder Road, and via Microsoft Teams to take public comment on the following proposed amendment to the protective zoning bylaw. Petition warrant article blank, I proposed a revision to the protective zoning bylaws by modifying section 3D, 3G, exterior mechanical systems appliances, as printed and provided in the legal notice. The full text of the proposed protective zoning bylaw amendment can be found on the town website, www.chathamma.gov/planning-board. Art Sprue Chair, Cape Cod Chronicle, print dates 3/6/25 and 3/13/25.
Okay, Thad, if you just introduce yourself again and
afternoon.
present your petition.
Thad Eldridge, Impact Chatham. This one you have not seen yet. I was meeting with a citizen, and we had a difficult situation with a generator associated with a sewer pump. And we said, well, Maybe we should rewrite the bylaw to make it actually work. So in 2012, we adopted this bylaw for noise-emitting sheds or exterior mechanical system appliances, air conditioners, heat pumps, HVAC units, generators, and pool equipment. The first thing that's in there is, it has to be at grade. And the question of where at grade is has morphed over the years to be, you can't reach it from ground level. Do you remember your acoustics classes, Mr. Chair? The higher
Long
you-
time ago.
The higher you raise up something, the further the sound is going to travel. We're going to be at town meeting, they're going to have speakers sitting up on tripods and poles to project out over because the sound waves will break up as it hits the ground. So if we're trying to avoid projecting sound to neighbors or causing nuisance to neighbors, why would we allow elevated units to be exempt from the setback? So we said, make all the units meet the setback. The bylaw was written so that it's a special setback. It's the side yard setback, which has been interpreted to be the side yard setback from all sides. That's in an R40 zoning district, you have your house 40 feet back, you have your generator 25 feet back from the street. It encourages putting that unit in the front of your house. And frankly, that's not the look that we're going for most properties in Chatham. I've provided 2 Google Earth images of generators that are in the front yard. Those are right from the street. We said, let's get rid of that. Let's make them meet all the setbacks. The leniency that we're looking for, the trouble is about 25% of the properties out there are weird. They don't work well with any strict bylaw. So we said, rather than a variance, let's go for a special permit. I've provided a few examples in the flyer. One was up in Chatham-port. While they were under construction, the neighbor said, hey, can you put that generator over there? And the builder said, absolutely. And the folks building the house, absolutely. And then it was in violation. And they went to the Zoning Board of Appeals, who said, you can't have a variance for that. The other one are a pair of houses off of Oyster Pond Furlong that I took through. One of them is not wide enough for anything to meet the setback, variance approved. The other one is wide enough, it has the space. Variance denied. We're proposing the generators directly next to each other. These are generators associated with the sewer pumps. One of the neighbors had written in opposition to the variance right away, just knee-jerk reaction. I'm opposed to this. Then wrote in another letter, said, ooh, scratch that first letter. This is the best location for me. I support it wholeheartedly. The zoning board could not approve the variance because there were conforming locations on the property. Under the criteria, we have noise and litter. That's a seldom used criteria at the Zoning Board of Appeals, and it actually gets to become more useful with having a special permit for the location of these exterior devices. When we were at the Finance Committee, it was Eric Whiteley who was most interested in this. I'm sure he's had a run-in or two with HVAC units that are in heat pumps that are not placed meeting the setback. I did put a little note in this flyer, we did talk about it, and I don't know the solution. The town doesn't require site plans for just a simple heat pump or HVAC unit, and we don't want them to. I mean, you're increasing the cost of that unit significantly by requiring a site plan, an as-built layout, anything else that has to happen. But we do have requirements to meet the setbacks. So how do we help the public meet the setbacks without having to take on the expense? At least with a special permit, if a problem came up after, they'd have a more reasonable recourse to take that to the Zoning Board of Appeals, likely when they're doing a different project or a larger project. If there are questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay. Board comments and questions? We'll begin with you, Warren.
Well, Tad, appreciate the issue, but I also have to admit that as I read this, my eyes glazed over. I'm not technically qualified to have an intelligent opinion about it. I haven't done anything more than just read the materials in our packet last week. I'm not educated enough to say this is the right answer, although I do think it needs an answer. So I'll just pass the baton.
Bob?
Yeah, if I am thinking of the right one, where they made them move the AC unit, it was too close to the neighbor. It could have been moved to the other side at great expense, or it could have been moved into the backyard closer to their pool, and that was the owner's objection to putting it closer to inconvenience them more than the neighbor. So I think we have these setbacks for a reason, and I'm not quite sure where this, I mean, there's parts of this that I get your point, that if it's hanging from a second floor, it should have the same requirements as if it was on the ground. That part of it, I see, but there's all this other stuff about getting rid of the setbacks in more generally that I'm just not sure I'm understanding, or if I do understand, I'm having a problem with, because I thought that the rules that we had in place in the example that you quoted were spot on, and that the building inspector caught it, and the installer should have known. And that is part of the issue here, is that perhaps we have to do a better job of explaining to all the installers here that they're liable, that, basically they gotta if they're gonna put it in before they get an okay, they better be prepared to pay for the cost of it if it's in the wrong place. I guess you need to talk a little bit more about why this is going to be, allow for the higher adjustment of ones that are higher, and put those under the same stricter requirements, and yet at the same time, you're asking for all kinds of variance from what I think are reasonable setbacks.
What about the properties that you can't meet the setback on? What about the cases when it is better to put it elsewhere?
Well, I think you could go and get a variance for those. I think there could be provision for that. And
I just provided an example where we could not gain a variance because legally you can't get a variance when you can propose something in a conforming location.
well, that's the problem. If you can put it somewhere else that's conforming, then your appeal for the variance doesn't have the same level as, I can't put an air conditioner in my house at all because there's nowhere for me to put the compressor.
There was one, Attorney Litchfield took it to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and it was this house, C-shaped house that was right up to the lot line. And they put it on the inside of the lot, but it was still non-conforming, even though the entire house was between the AC unit and the neighbor. I believe he was able to get a variance for that, but it was very tricky, and they never even thought that they would have to go for any special relief because they were on the opposite side of the existing dwelling. We've run into quite a few issues with these and the strict setback. Now, when somebody files with the Zoning Board of Appeals, all the abutters to abutters are all notified. So the party immediately adjacent, I mean, the one with the pool, that neighbor is going to be protected by the zoning board, who's going to say, well, wait a second here. Why are you putting it right up against? We have a criteria. How are you meeting noise and litter? And in that case, you'd be hard pressed to meet it.
Well, except that going back to that case, there were two solutions. One was to put it on the other side of the house and have to redo the basement at great expense. And that's where it was, so the argument that you were gonna make somebody do that at great expense, it wasn't clear that the zoning board was going to say, nope, sorry. It was only when it was discovered that there was a spot on that side of on the same side of the house where it was, but within the pool area, that everybody said, well, obviously, you have to move it. So I don't have a great faith that and I don't know that we want to burden our zoning board with this every single time somebody has a desire to put something somewhere else. I think we have zoning rules to make it simpler in general as to where these things go.
I would rather burden the zoning board with special permits than with variances. Variances are incredibly difficult, and in that case, even though it would be a great expense, that should have been considered a self-imposed hardship by putting it in the wrong location and not qualify for the hardship, financial or otherwise, criteria under a variance.
Okay, Charlene, comments, questions?
I was okay with this until Bob.
Yeah.
So I happened to be in attendance at a zoning board hearing, for a neighbor of mine, not to do with this, but there was a generator in one case and an air conditioner in another. One of the variances got approved, one got denied, and I still don't understand why the variance that was granted got their variance.
Right.
Except perhaps it was the attorney who was presenting it did a very compelling job with that. I think there are situations, especially on some of the older homes, where, to put in a new air conditioner or a condenser or a generator, I had heat pumps put in, and we had to really look, where is the doohickey gonna fit, where it's not gonna, be obnoxious. I mean, I have no neighbors, so it would only be obnoxious to me. I don't have a problem with this. However, it just brings up a question in my mind because some of these were new construction. And it was like after the fact. Why are these not showing up when they go for their building permit? Number one, they should be. If they're proposing to do a generator, an exterior air conditioner that requires something, or a condenser, then that should be shown on the proposed building plan and be shown in the electrical and, the plans that are presented at the time of the building permit. If it is an existing structure that may, in my case, my house meets all the setbacks, but has a huge setback on the front because of where it's located. If the only place I could have put this was on the back of the property, even though my house has been there for 37 years, I would have had to have gone to ZBA and sought relief. In my case, because it's a pre-existing non-conforming house, on that side, I could have gone for a special permit. But there are some, I'm getting a shaking of a no. It's an extension of a pre-existing non-conforming structure.
It's a separate structure.
Not if, it is a separate structure.
Under Dedrick, that would be
It
a
is.
separate
So in
structure.
that case,
Not.
I have to lean towards then supporting this. I'm just not happy with the way it's worded. And I don't know how to wordsmith it, because it does say you do have to meet applicable minimum building and structural setbacks as defined as proposed in the appendix, except by special permit of the Zoning Board of Appeals. But under what circumstance? That to me is what's missing. That's what's missing to me. If it's a prior pre-existing non-conforming structure, and that's the only place it can go, then it should be by special permit. I have no problem with that.
But
But if it's a new structure.
new structure, right.
That's not accounting for this doohickey.
Right.
At the time it gets a building permit, well, sorry.
Yeah.
That was an error on somebody's part, but certainly not.
Yep.
Except when it's a new structure that's replacing a non-conforming structure on a non-conforming lot where there's no space anyway. So one of these pictures is from.
Well,
the
but with
Little
all
Beach.
due respect, then you design it so that it can meet that. You build the structure so that you have a little cutout where that can go. Ours is nestled in a nice little pocket
Right.
that just happened to be existing, that we were able to put it into. So, you know, I think if you're tearing down and rebuilding another home with a special permit, you accommodate for that in your design for your special permit.
And I
So-
can candidly say I've gone round and round with many an architect trying to get them to commit to locations of these, and they say, oh, we just do that afterwards.
Yeah. Okay, Frank, any comments?
It just so happens that I've just added additions to our property. And so I have firsthand experience with this. And it is true that it's very difficult sometimes to locate these mechanicals. And I spent time with the architect and surveyor, and it's not often an easy answer. And we have very different, I mean, the properties that we have in Chatham are all over the place. Some of them are you know, very oddly shaped. And so I like the idea of a special permit because it allows us to deal with these issues. And I understand it's more work on a case-by-case basis, because a lot of them are really individual cases, and they're not necessarily subject to a variance under the legal principles of variance. So I like the solution. Again, I don't understand why ground level is in there, so I would be happy to take that out. I like the idea of incorporating all setbacks, not just the abutter setbacks. I think that's a good idea. And so to me, I think this is a acceptable approach, and I would be supportive.
Okay. Catherine, you have any comments or questions?
You're muted.
You're muted.
Yes, I do have a few comments. To be honest with you, the way it's stated, it seems like it's very simple and straightforward, and that it should have always been that way. In my mind, it should be that mechanicals and any concrete pad on which they're placed should be considered as part of the building footprint. And that building footprint then should obey, you know, all the zoning laws regarding setbacks. However, in the discussion tonight, I kind of have to echo what Warren said. It seems like there's a lot of complications that, you know, I'm not sure that I completely understand. If there is a way that we can revise the wording so that it's absolutely clear that the mechanicals that are placed, you know, presumably next to the building are part of the building footprint. And therefore, they, what do you say, meet the applicable minimum building structure setbacks in Appendix 2, Schedule of Dimensional Requirements. I do agree that that phrase, except by special permit, we should either eliminate that, because if a special permit is going to be done, it will be done under the rules that apply to special permits. In other words, pre-existing non-conforming structure. if we keep that phrase in there, I do think we need to define under what conditions a special permit could be applied to the consideration of the mechanicals. Otherwise, it should be very simple and straightforward. It's part of the building footprint. And it's too bad that the people, put it in afterwards and they don't get that, but it is part of the building footprint and it should meet the applicable minimum building structure setbacks. So I don't know if I'm being too simple-minded about this, but if there's some way that we can maybe, as I think it was Charlene who said, wordsmith this a bit, so it's just very simple and very clear, so that there's no question about it. Maybe we just can eliminate that phrase about special permit, because if a special permit is to be applied, it will be.
If I could start with one, what we commonly refer to as special permit is 40A, Section 6. It is a change, alteration, or extension of a pre-existing non-conforming structure or use. We would be looking at a Section 9 special permit, which are special permitted items in the bylaw. In our use table, we have a number of Section 9 special permitted items. This would fall under the same. We're not extending a nonconformity, we're decreasing a setback when appropriate, when reviewed by the Zoning Board of Appeals. As far as the unit being part of the structure, that argument can be made for the unit that's attached to the side of the building, sitting on hangers. Some of these units require, some can be a couple of inches off the building, some need to be a foot, some need to be 5 feet off the building and independent. So it's hard to say it's part of the building footprint. And and the case law has really pushed us to, these are separate items. Also, it's the zoning officer's interpretation that you can't go for the change, alteration, or extension, the Section 6 special permit, for something new.
Okay, all right, understood. So is there a way that we can, I mean, when I just read this, it seems very straightforward, but in the discussion, it seems like it's not straightforward. So is there a way that we can reword it so that it becomes as
Complicated.
straightforward as it seems? So it becomes as straightforward as it seems.
Okay,
So there's.
so go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, there are two issues. One is sound and the other is aesthetics, right? And we have, we deal with those sometimes. We require that they build a little fence around something, or we have them enclose it in a sound, you can buy a generator and you can buy a generator with a noise hood on it. So, I mean, there are ways to mitigate the need for the setbacks. And I think that somehow that's not, there's nothing mentioned here in terms of how that fits into this. It probably would be better if we, if we had some of that in there too. I just, I mean, if you need to get, because I want everybody to get a heat pump. It's designing incentives for the state to become all heat pumps. And if you're telling me now that there are places in Chatham that you couldn't do that because you just couldn't put the unit out there.
98 Oyster Pond Furlong is one of several examples of properties where there is no space to put anything without, in this case, a variance.
But you mentioned, well, you could put it in the front yard, and so.
No, at 98 Oyster Pond Furlong, that lot is 50 feet wide with 25-foot setbacks.
Okay, but I'm saying, again, we have to put them where, sometimes we have to do it at some expense to the homeowner, so putting it in the front yard with a nice little barrier, or having to redo the planting in front of it. All those things are, if that was part of this whole equation, it would not have as much, people would not fight it quite as much. So I guess I'm okay with some flexibility is what I'm saying here. I just only want people to be able to do this when there isn't an acceptable place already. I don't want people to use this as an excuse to not put it where it could go that was an inconvenience to them or an expense to them. And that's where, again, yes, the zoning board has that ability, but they're all citizens of Chatham, and they're not in the business of making their neighbors pay $6,000 or $7,000 just because they think it should be over there and they don't want to do it. So I don't want to, that's the pressure I don't think the zoning board needs. I think it needs to be much more specific if we're going to put these exceptions in there.
Okay, so I unfortunately agree with Bob, Charlene, and Catherine. There's some work that needs to be done in here. The removal of located at ground level, I'm assuming that was taken out because you want any of these, even if they're elevated, to fall into the criteria. Is that what my understanding is? That's the first piece, okay. And I think that having some criteria with the special permit, because if you open the door for everything, whether it's new or pre-existing whatnot, I think there has to be some component of that for this particular thing, because I have dealt with this personally. With a mini split system, the air compressor, the compressors with the AC, and a standby generator. I had to deal with all of this, and it's not an easy task to do. Very, very challenging. In order to resolve some of it, yes, there was an expense to me, but I resolved it. It was necessary to do that. So I think but there was a solution for that to go ahead without triggering anything. I had to make the decision that this was something I really wanted to do. So I think there has to be that component here before this really, at least for me, to actually say that we can go ahead and refer this with a recommendation. So is there anything that the board thinks that we could, if we continue this, if there was some adjustments to language? I don't think so either. I think the best thing to do is just to perhaps just close the hearing and then vote.
Have we opened this up to,
Not yet.
okay.
Not yet. We have to,
Yeah.
we have all those other pieces.
Kind of lost where we
right?
are here in the
Yeah,
process.
yeah. We're still at step 3.
One.
We have another 6 to go, which I do plan on doing. So next, public statements in favor of the application, and any hands up? I don't see any. Any correspondence on this one? No correspondence. Public statements opposing the application? I see no hands up, no rebuttal necessary. Any other board comments on this?
Mr. Chair?
So, Catherine, go ahead.
Catherine?
Go ahead.
I just want to comment on what you just said. You don't think it's possible that if we continued this public hearing, that maybe that could come back with some reworking of the wording that would satisfy our concerns?
I think, as we did the other one, I would say we give them a chance and see if they
Yeah.
do. If he comes back with the same thing, we can continue where we were and still make our decision associated with it. So I have no problem with that. If the other board members are open to that approach too.
think that's a reasonable approach. I move that we continue this public hearing to no earlier than 5 PM on, whoops,
We were going to ask the board if they were willing to start at 4 PM that day. You have a rather full agenda. So if
oh,
we're
the other
doing-
public hearing, though, I did till
you
no
said
earlier than
Okay.
5.
Then maybe we can start earlier with the other items then.
Okay.
With the other items, yes. Go
So I
ahead.
messed that up already. I'll continue the mess up, that we continue this to no earlier than 5 PM on April 14th.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approve.
Bob Werschafter,
Bob Wirtschafter, approve.
Charlene,
Charlene Greenhouse, approve.
Frank,
Frank Shara, approve.
Catherine Hepburn,
Catherine Halpern, approve.
and Art Spur, I approve. So we'll continue this to April 14th.
We'll see you then, and we'll take this back to the drawing board and see if there's anything.
Thank you very much for hearing us out on this. I think you could be close on some of these.
Quite possibly. I may actually see if the zoning board can reach out to you with any of their opinions on it.
Okay, so last item is long-range planning. Just to summarize, after we had our hearing Monday, and we did make a recommendation with the changes in that, I think Katie, Christine, and I had another 4 meetings that we attended. The select board on Tuesday night, and the select board voted 4-0-0 to make a recommendation for approval on it. They had some good questions. Christine and I were able to clarify some of those. We needed to meet up with the Finance Committee on Thursday. We met with them on Tuesday, but they didn't have all the information then, so we met with them on Thursday. Again, good questions and that. I think we were able to clarify a lot of points. They voted 6-0-0 to recommend it. So we're a couple of steps through the process in here. The next one, and why I'm put it on the agenda is, I'd like to have some input from the board. I mean, we've been through our process in here, but is there other outreach you think that you would like to see happen on this before town meeting? Certainly would be open to any comments or suggestions to where we could actually do that outreach. Charlene?
We have to be cautious when we do outreach, because we're a public entity and the board who proposed this. We can do fact sheets.
Okay,
And we
good
can
point.
do question and answer, but we can't be a proponent for this,
Okay.
like in the newspaper or, flyers. We can't do that kind of thing. We
Okay.
can do fact sheets.
Fact sheets.
But we can't be out and out proponents like you would if this was,
So
know,
if we
something
did a fact sheet, does that mean we couldn't do a question and answer then?
if it was providing for facts, I think we could do that, yes. But we can't give,
Yeah,
opinion as to why you should approve this.
Arthur,
And that kind of
you're going to be presenting this at town meeting?
yes.
Okay, so it could be fundamentally the same thing, a fact sheet. It could be Arthur's presentation. It could be kind of the,
Well, I would assume that at the town meeting that you could promote this.
Yes,
in-
you
in
could
the
be
way-
more of a proponent at town meeting.
town meeting.
But we can't use public funds or anything like that to be a proponent. I understand the law and I get it, but we have to just be cautious of how we
Okay.
engage the public.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Mr. Chair?
Okay. Yeah, just a minute. Katie first?
So in the, for each year, the town manager puts together the annual town meeting warrant show. So there will be some explanation during that time, for that specific show, but that's on every warrant article, basically.
Okay, got
But
it.
I do believe, for the ADU, and Catherine can correct me if I'm wrong, that she and Ally had worked with then Channel 18, but they did almost like an interview type of question and answer fact-based conversation that then aired on Channel 18 about, and again, the proposed, at that time, ADU bylaw. So that's something that could be considered as well.
Yeah,
We, we don't have a lot of, I mean, there's 6 weeks before town meeting. Typically, when we've done outreach to other organizations in the past, it has been prior to closing the public hearing and going to, because we're getting input. So just with all of that information, I wanted to put that out there for the, the board's consideration about what they'd like to do. I mean, we can certainly set aside some time, maybe on the second meeting in April, for questions and answers if need be. But I didn't know, we didn't know if there was anything more that the board wanted to do. So with that, I'll turn it back to you.
okay. Catherine, you had some comments?
Yeah, no, I'll just support what Katie said. We did, for the ADU bylaw, Ally and I did a little video that was like an interview, and it was like question and answer, and it was kind of a video fact sheet. And am I correct in understanding, Katie, that for this year, for all articles on the warrant, there'll be a similar video made? That was done. It was like a whole series of video interviews that were done by usually the chair and the community development department person, in our case, the planner. Just a question and answer to give out information to the public about that particular article on the warrant. So definitely we did that in the past, and we can do that again. And I would just suggest, like we've done in the past, there's not many regularly scheduled planning board meetings before annual town meeting, but we could have a question and answer session, an information session at the end of every meeting, that the public is welcome to come and ask questions. And it is a question and answer session. I think we sometimes called them listening and information sessions. In this case, we may need to call it an information session, because we've kind of done the listening, it's already gone through the public hearing. So we could do that in the remaining, maybe there's 2 planning board meetings before annual town
I
meeting.
think 2, yes.
Yeah, so we could have an information session, and then that video could be made.
Any other input, Katie, on this?
I think Warren wanted to weigh in.
Okay. Warren, please.
I forget how many days or weeks ago it was, but I participated in a planning session online with representatives from the towns on the Lower Cape, where everybody goes around and somebody from the planning section of each town talks about what they're doing. Gloria was going to be at that, but she was unable to participate. So I was listening in, but I was going to say nothing but listen. Eastham was there and talked about what they're doing, and they apparently have an 80-page bylaw. They're rewritten the entire thing.
Did you say 8 or 80?
80,
Okay.
I recall. They're doing the entire general bylaw.
Okay.
And so my eyes were open. And then he said, and they've done some other revisions along the way. Then he mentioned that it's interesting, they used AI to generate a 3.5-minute, what resulted in a 3.5-minute video, all generated by AI, which drew on all of the public documents, all the public meetings, all of the public input, electronic data that was available. The presenter was unfamiliar with AI, but was the one who reviewed the product that came back that was generated by somebody on staff and somebody perhaps like our Channel 18 people, who, it was 2 people involved in getting this done. My assumption is my antennae went up, was 1, I'd like to watch this, and 2, they can't have spent a whole lot of money on it. They don't have any more money than we do. So I don't know what it, but it was, in-house, put it that way. I went and looked and found the video, watched it, and it was really, it was pretty good. It basically said, this was the problem, this is what we recommended, and this is why it makes sense. That was sort of the message. The presenter said the only real problem was that AI didn't know how to pronounce the name of the town. So he says, that wasn't the only change. We tweaked a couple of things, but he said, I was really surprised. It was really pretty good. And when I watched it, I don't know what their problems were or what their solutions were or what the 80 pages was really addressing. But knowing none of that was specific to Eastham, I said, well, gee, why couldn't we do something like that if it's a no-cost, reasonably quick thing to do? Worst you can do is come up with a 3.5-minute video for Chatham that we don't like. Don't know the answer. But anyway, I did track down the town planner who told me, well, this is the guy who was doing it, and this was the technician in town who did the technical part of it, and here's their names and contact information. Well, I didn't share it with the board for open meeting law concerns, but I say, if they can do something like that, that is certainly promotion, although it was factual, maybe we should explore it. And then I also remember one of the very first meetings that I attended when I joined the planning board, that was from Truro, about how they were kind of trying to come up with, well, how do we come up with, is anything too big? And how do we...
The massing.
The massing kind of stuff. And they ended up with what they wanted to do and then figured out, well, how are we going to sell this? And they ended up doing a bunch of things. What sticks in my mind is they got a bunch of Legos out and they ended up building structures that would fit under their new proposal, and then had some lots that were from downtown and said, okay, this is what we would put there. And then they sat out in front of the library and the grocery stores and so on, and let everybody take a look at, say, well, this is what the zoning would do. And the net result was it got approved, right? Well, that sort of stuck with me, not that we were planning to do that, but again, that was certainly promotion of that, and they seem to not have had any problem with it. I don't want to recommend that, but we do have the renderings that have been done by the outside consultants. And, to the extent we can, get the large versions of those, it certainly is something that could be advertised. You sit outside of the Stop and Shop, up in Harwich and say, look, this is what it means at Chatham. And everybody who comes out and say, well, look, this is what the bylaw, might look like.
Or the village market.
Or the village market. Well, I'm not limiting it. I'm saying how many, you got to get somebody willing to sit there and do it. But, that did come to mind, that Truro was able to, come up with physical renderings, in their case, 3-dimensional actually, to actually promote something to the public, to a public which probably didn't know much about it, but might be voting anyway. And then I thought, I know nothing about an AI-generated video, but the one I saw for Eastham, oh, by the way, I sent around, I think, to staff too, a link to the video. So I couldn't find it on their website, to be honest, although I was said that it is there. And, what do I know? But it seems like a tool that might be fun to see what it might do. There may be other issues where that kind of an approach would be of help. I just mentioned that, so.
Okay, I think,
Mr. Chairman?
oh, sure.
Only because we only have
Two
meetings.
Two meetings.
Would it be appropriate to have a brainstorming work session of the board? Because, we have 2 weeks in between until the next meeting.
Yeah, I think.
I keep looking at my calendar.
I understand several
Yeah.
people might not be available on that, from what I've been understanding, so I'm not I'm
I
not
may
quite
not
sure
be
we
able to
could
be
do
here
it.
on the 28th.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure we could do it between now and the 14th, but maybe between the 14th and
28th.
the 28th.
Actually, that Monday is a holiday.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
It's not an option.
Oh, that is a holiday, Patriots Day.
Yeah. So, maybe, is the 7th, are some of the board members or are most of the board members available for that on the 7th? No, yeah, Bob, Bob, I know you're not gonna be here. 7th April? Yeah, 7th in April. You're not here either, so two board members are out. And I'm not quite sure when Bob Dubus is back also, so we might have 3 board members out. We would have to, we'd have to look at another date.
Yeah,
Katie?
Mr. Chairman, Catherine's trying to speak as well.
Oh, Catherine, I'm sorry, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, yes. So I'm just wondering, this extra meeting to brainstorm, what is it that we want to brainstorm? How do we want to publicize this? Is that what we're brainstorming? Because,
Charlene, you
Well,
were,
I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking. But, I mean,
Okay.
I'd leave it entirely up to you, Mr. Chair, if
Yeah.
you're comfortable trying to figure out what you want to do.
okay, go ahead,
ma'am,
Catherine.
may I make a comment then? I think we need to be practical.
Yeah, okay.
We have, the time for something like that would have been 6 months ago.
Yep,
So we have 2 meetings left, and then we have annual town meeting. We do know something. The Truro people who did what Warren what reminded us of with the Lego, they did that like 8 months in advance of annual town meeting, and they did it a lot. They did it over and over at many locations. We just don't have time for that.
Yep.
We've done the public hearing, everything's done and dusted. We need to use the time that we have just to get the information out as best as possible, because the truth is, people do not vote for something they do not understand.
Right.
Or that they do not know for. So with all due respect, I think it's a great idea to have brainstorming. I think the Lego thing that Truro did was a great thing that they did, but we have to be practical. We've got 2 meetings left. I believe I understood from Katie that they will do the warrant show with videos for all the articles that are on the warrant. So that video will be made, and it'll probably be our chair and Christine. And so that'll be part of that show. And then if I could just suggest information session at the next 2 meetings, at least we should do that.
I think that one is absolutely, we should do that one. And the next 2 meetings on the 14th and the 28th of April is add that to the agenda. It's an informational discussion on the long-range planning, and that would be at least something we could discuss. If there's input, any comments in that, we can certainly entertain that from the public. Katie?
Mr. Chairman, my thought is that we also, maybe we word it as a question and answer, because, as opposed to informational, because we've done
Correct.
that.
Right.
And, there was a presentation given for the public hearing. So unless the expectation is that we're going to give the same presentation
Correct.
at those
Okay.
2 meetings, my suggestion is that we have it labeled on the agenda as, long West Chatham question and answer for, public,
Okay.
and kind of leave it at that. And then we'll talk internally about what happens with a video. We'll certainly explore Warren's suggestion, but we'll also look to what we've done in the past. And at a minimum, we will be looking to do the town manager's annual warrant show, at which point in time we'll be providing explanations.
Okay, this is good. I'll take this information. I'll work with the community development staff and see what we do in addition to the ads to the next 2 meetings. And we'll provide you that information as soon as we have a plan. See what we come up with. Anything else,
Mr.
Catherine?
Chair, yeah, I think this is already the case, but just to be sure that all the information is posted on the website. The visuals from Union Studio, the finalized draft of the bylaw that now we've got it back from the select board. And if it's possible, and again, forgive me, I haven't checked the website, but some version of the presentation, maybe look at what was presented and, I mean, a short summary in layman's language.
Yep.
This is why we did this bylaw, this is what it does. And then, so it's all available on the website as well.
Yeah, I'm getting a nod from Katie that this
That is all
information
up
has
there.
been posted, yes, but we'll look
Great.
at the other suggestions that you had, and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Is
Yep.
there any oppositional intelligence that we have? I mean, generally speaking, by now, we would have heard some of the objections. Is that?
That'll happen in town meeting.
Yeah, I'm sure it
No,
would. There was
usually-
some questions at the select board meeting associated with it, and similar type of questions at the finance committee meeting, but it was mostly to clear up some points. And many of the things, both Christine and I could answer these questions fairly well because our board members vetted most of these issues, and certainly it helped both of us from the standpoint of clarifying points because we had gone through this to such a degree that's somewhat ingrained in our mindset about what we did and why we did it. So that was very helpful. I think a question and answer piece could work well too, and maybe that's something that we'll come up with based on some of the things that we heard at these meetings, and maybe we can do some clarifying points on that. Frank, did you have something you wanted to say before we?
Well, the only, I think we've all had discussions informally and socially with various people, but my discussions have been almost unanimously supportive. I just thought I'd mention that.
Okay, with that, I have a motion.
Chairman, I move that we adjourn this meeting.
I second.
Okay, do a roll call. Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approve.
Bob Werschafter,
Bob Wirtschafter, approve.
Charlene,
Charlene Greenhouse, approve.
Frank,
Frank Scherer, approve.
Catherine. You're muted.
Catherine Halpern approved.
And Art Spur, I approve. And the time is 6:34 PM.